Okay, hi everyone, welcome. I'm Koch. I'm going to be presenting about a data dashboard that Verso and the Leahy Center have been making together, and more generally about how you can apply, in a fairly technical sense, some of the design philosophies that we have been both building on and using. Please, questions at any time. And as Kendall said, I have somewhat of a sore throat. I was just in Chicago for the weekend for a 24-hour horror movie festival, so my throat is a little sore, and I may not be projecting how I normally would be, so please interrupt. But yeah, so the first thing to talk about is the process of working through a dashboard that is centered on the feedback from the community that asked for the dashboard in the first place. And so we want to talk about, one, just a framework for going through this, two, how to leverage particularly Python, presuming that the people here for PyData are excited about Python, to build a prototype that you can use to sort of generate further feedback and narrow in on what the core utility you're going to offer is. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have some time for you guys to provide feedback as promised by the session earlier. Okay, so the project in question, the specific project, is to have a flexible, maintainable, consolidated, state-level data portal hosted at UVM Center for Rural Studies. What does this mean? There's a lot of data about Vermont, as there are about every state. However, Vermont does not provide access or analysis of that data at the level that wealthier states do. And there are questions about, on a federal level, how the access to this data is going to change in the coming years. Some portions of it have already changed, some portions of it will continue to change. So we need to have data that is accessible to a wide range of audiences, not just CSVs that someone can work on, but interactive dashboards, the ability to build reports that you can use to help for presentations and local government. Importantly, I think, and this will sort of drive everything going forward, the idea for this dashboard is not something solely that the Center for Rural Studies and the Leahy Institute sort of initiated from itself, sui generis, right? This is a thing that people have been asking for in communities across Vermont. And so what the process needs to incorporate feedback from those communities and sort of design input directly from those communities as it continues to move forward, so that it meets the original stated needs and needs that sort of continual prototyping reveal. So the sort of first question, which is fairly easy to answer, is why would we want to build this data access point, this dashboard, in an open source model? Any takes before they appear? Any answers?
Vendor lock-in.
Sorry?
Vendor lock-in.
Vendor lock-in. Yeah, you don't want to get locked into a vendor. Anybody else?
Lower cost.
Lower cost. Anyone else?
Transparency.
Transparency. That's a huge one. Obviously, with something like that is about transparency, sort of in its very initiation, right? Then having it be technically transparent seems to be important too. I actually don't remember the order that these will appear, but okay, yeah. The most important one is just it's like both of these first 2 points I think point to. It's just easier. Like not having to deal with a vendor, having more control over it at a low level, and just if it's open source and you're not and you're leaving it open source, and you don't have to deal with all of the like, oh, how do we manage account login? How do we manage security? Like, we're not worried about that. It's open source data, it's open source access, everything's good. Accessibility, transparency go together. Collaboration, hopefully this becomes something, and it already is beginning to become something, that other people want to work on at a state level, other places within UVM, whoever within the state. This is a sort of key goal that if you're going to offer something as a consolidated portal for anything, right, then ideally you are pulling in people that will actually make it that. You're not just setting a new sort of false standard. And just something that people can replicate on their own and contribute to. Okay, so the sort of 3 steps that have gone into creating this prototype that we're going to be moving forward with and generating feedback from is first just kind of looking around, this is comparative research, what do other states do, what do other organizations that are similar do, how do they meet sort of similar stated needs, what utility is there that maybe is not immediately present from the initial sort of ask, but can be useful down the line. Moving on to how we're prototyping it in Python in a scalable and sort of forward-looking way, and then how you sort of transition from that prototype stage to fuller stage, more feedback and beginning work on a final, at least for the moment, product. So the first thing, as I said, that we started with is looking at what are other data dashboards similar to this, like in other states, and how can they show us what we need to do for our own. So the first thing, as talked about earlier, and this comes a lot from feedback, is sort of the ease of accessing the data, the ease of performing sort of low-level analysis on it, nothing like enormously sophisticated, but sort of visually appealing and all the things that we might associate with a data dashboard. A really big one that came out of this is being able to create from pre-existing visualizations, pre-existing analysis, a sort of customized to a particular situation report. If you think about someone who's working in local government or going to a select board or something like that, this becomes potentially a useful sort of first step. Similarly for, say, like a housing developer, you can look and, okay, the throat is a little starting to go. You can look and find reports that are, you can find analysis that is particular for your situation, customize it, and then sort of put all these together into a report that you can share with people without reference to the original site. It's not like you have to go digging every time. That idea came from Wisconsin and Connecticut's data portals. Both incorporate some version of this functionality. And then another thing which comes less from the kind of technical side and looking at how this is implemented and what the final product is in other situations, but just kind of thinking through what differentiates Vermont from these other states. What differentiates, in a broader sense, the particular situation that's trying to be addressed from similar situations. And in Vermont's case, right, this is a huge one is the lower data resolution, right? There's tons of census areas, there's tons of areas that we have data on in Vermont where the population is, 355 or something like that. Yeah, or 22. And how do you make that, how do you present that analysis in such a way that it's not sort of misleading about how powerful of an analysis it is? If the census reports that 30% of an area is living under the poverty line and the area has like 20 people and the margin of error is 20%, then it gets kind of rough. And then also just focusing on the kind of particular governmental situations within Vermont. Maybe you guys know, maybe you don't, but Vermont has regional and development commissions that sort of aggregate across county lines. So there's some data that's going to be in a county level and some data that's going to be in this sort of extra county aggregates. And thinking through how best to present the data was an important step at this level. And so then once we started to have an idea of what sort of at least our initial view from the feedback from this comparative research and from our sort of idea about what a dashboard might be start to come together, then the next stage is kind of prototyping. The first point here, very obvious. You need to get the data, you need to clean the data, you need to make the data something that you can present in a pleasant fashion, swapping out your census codes or whatever sort of technical specifications you have for something that is going to be readable for a human audience. But then, and I think that this is a sort of key point and is the thing that is the most PyData specific is, so those of us in the room who are technical, right, and are excited about Python and are confident with Python, probably, particularly in the data audience side, that comfort is largely going to be on the data manipulation side, right? Like how you're cleaning the data, how you're processing the data, what pipelines you might be setting up with it, what sort of visualizations you might be doing with it. But to have a prototype that is going to be available to people, that is going to be sort of full-featured and vibrant enough that the feedback you generate will be actually useful and hopefully specific and have some level of consideration for design and what's possible, and not a sort of, well, I think it would be neat if that is not sort of in relation to, I guess what I'm trying to say here is we want to bring the community's ideas and the development process into some sort of collaboration with each other. And that requires having a sufficiently developed product that the community's feedback relates to that product instead of just being a sort of generalized sort of difficulty with what's already there. And so in doing that process, I think the most important thing, and maybe the sort of largest takeaway for those who are interested in doing any kind of work like this from this presentation, is you can get a ton of mileage out of a purely Python-based front-end and back-end prototype, provided that you are looking forward to the future and you know to what extent Python will be your front end forever. And if it won't be, which if you're going to build something that a lot of people will use, and that will be sort of easy and fluid to interact with on the web, then it probably won't be. So keeping them throughout this process strictly separate, you're doing everything in Python, but you've drawn this hard line between your front end and your back end, allows you to, at some point, keep all that good logic and data pipelining and analysis that you've built up in Python, but swap out a front end for, in this case, JavaScript and React and Next are the specifics, but something that will be more sort of flexible in the long term. So that is, I think, the key emphasis in this prototyping section. And then there's, again, throughout, right, there's a ton of great people in Vermont, and I think there's a ton of, anytime you're building a project like this, there's going to be a ton of great people who can serve as a kind of representative of the broader feedback you're eventually going to move towards that can give you a kind of in-depth analysis of what's working and what's not working and what will be good to have in the future. So just continually checking in that process. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Just, okay, cool. Why Python? This is fairly short. Again, because I assume that everybody here at PyData is sort of right in the title is gonna prefer Python. Shiny R is an alternative, and which I think if your plan is to build something that is eventually going to be used by a broad audience, I would just sort of, in my experience, which is limited, but I would flatly recommend against. And then the kind of two options. You can, if you wanted to, and you're sufficiently experienced, of course, like start right with the JavaScript level, build it as a right in the browser from the beginning. I think that, again, getting to a point where you have enough of a product that you can generate exciting and sort of specific feedback is what pushed us away from that towards having this kind of Python, and also this idea that we would just recycle all of our Python logic to be the back end of our eventual platform. And the two options within Python that we consider are Streamlit and Dash. We ended up using Streamlit just because it's faster and easier, provided again that you keep it as corded off as possible. So this is just a silly example, but for the pure vibe coders, the pure AI coders out there, this is something to maybe be a little bit wary of. So this is, I just asked ChatGPT, can you code up this idea, right? And like, not to get really in the weeds here, but this is combining the front end and the back end, right? So if at some point you're gonna want to use this logic later, it's gonna be like something that you have to go back and fix, because now your front end and your back end are coupled together. So it's like, because it's saying select from these options, and the options are both what's being presented and what's being worked on at the same time. And then, does anyone know how to fix this? Probably you don't have to say it all at once. Something like that was just a quick version that I wrote. This is not what we would actually want, because they're still a little bit like too close together, but it's a step in the right direction towards decoupling those. Okay, no eyes glazing over, hopefully. I'll just skip that because I'm going to show you the thing later. And then this becomes the next sort of important step and difficulty in the process is when do you have enough, and sort of how do you have enough, and for us it becomes again this, when do we have enough to guide future conversations? When is there enough that people can chime in with what is useful to them? And part of that comes from, again, checking in with sort of subject matter experts and saying, are there sort of obvious things that are not being explored here that you'd like to see some sort of reference to? Or are there wastes of time that are going to distract from the purpose? And I think that is something to think about throughout, is the kind of the over-eager side that maybe any developer can feel, and certainly I can feel, from, okay, cool, we have all this data, we're starting to do fun stuff with it. What more sort of fun, exciting things, ideas can I cram in there? And that is another, I think, really big take away from this presentation that to focus the product on the need in not just a positive way of making sure that what you're doing is sort of, that you're providing all the things that people ask for, but also in this negative way of making sure that you're not providing a bunch of things that nobody asked for. Which in this kind of open source, I mean, we had the why open source slide earlier, but one of the potential pitfalls of a open source community feedback-centered development process is that you, without the kind of tight structure that a corporation might provide, that you end up making something that can do everything, right? Like we're going to write the dashboard to end all dashboards. Anything you could ever want to look at will be on there, and any sort of analysis. And that, even if you could do it, which you probably can't, it wouldn't actually be the thing that is useful to the Vermont situation. And so again, just pulling in that feedback and really considering it as much as possible. Then again, you've prepared at this point to you have a clear separation within your pre-existing prototype of the front end and the back end, and your excuse me, you're able to transition the logic for everything you did in the front end to, in our case, again, we went to JavaScript, and this actually is a step where if you sort of set things up well, I think there is more of a potential for the kind of fever dream of hello AI, this is previous version, can you translate this effectively, right, from one coding paradigm to another, which is a powerful opportunity if you've set things up for yourself that it will work properly. And then just for some specifics on the back end, how do you keep that working, essentially wrap everything up in Fast API, which is just a API library in Python was our answer, and then split them into separate containers on the same server. Okay, I think this one appears too. Does anybody have any suggestions of pitfalls?
Complexity.
Okay.
Dashboard rut.
Dashboard rut, yeah. Can you say more about dashboard rut?
Basically, other dashboards will never be used and will never be.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's again that kind of hopefully, right, there's people know enough about what they want that when they tell you what they want, you have some level of validity from that, but even then, right, there's always going to be a difficulty with that, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's just having people, stakeholders who are going to take the time to go on your dashboard is already a big challenge, I think.
Yeah.
Which is always a kind of, how do you get people hooked on going on your platform?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I already have way too many platforms that I'm using.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use Discord and I'm always forgetting to log in. And I'm always being like, and for some people it's like, our Teams terrible. But our institutions are forcing us to use it, so we're using it.
Yeah.
So there's a fight between how many platforms can you use.
Yeah. Okay. These I don't think I included something like that, but I do think it is a huge one, and I think that again that's the emphasis on stakeholder engagement throughout the process that it's not even just you tell us what you want, we go off, we build it, we come back, we give it to you, and you say, oh great, I'll just put that in my folder here, but is instead something where there's enough active input sort of every step of the way that it is something that people get used to using and excited about using. That's definitely a big one. Okay, but these are so complexity, right? We talked about the getting over eager with poor quality data earlier, and then again, getting too absorbed with the details of what you're doing is, I think, in line with what Jonathan was saying. That is, I think, part of the, potential disease of dashboard threat. Any questions or comments at this point?
I just think one other thing to consider is like the boundaries of the system that you're building.
Right.
Like how do we not host all data for all people in Vermont, but rather allow for community identified need to be a guide that we then set guardrails around.
Right.
So that it's not impossible to navigate, but rather provides targeted information.
I think that's very true. Sorry, one second. Do you mind filling this with hot water? My throat is about to be yeah, I think that system boundary is an important thing to consider, certainly. I think that how we set that boundary is a sort of core question, and even difficulty from the community feedback is how do we know that what people are saying will be useful in this place, and how do we kind of keep the boundary around that trim where we're focusing on the most important problems as an initial thing. And again, I think that the building up a prototype that is scalable for later results, later development, but that also ideally generates that feedback is a big one. Thank you. Okay, so now for the last third or so of this, I was hoping that people would be eager to take the time and effort to give a little look. It's honestly, it'd be much better if your computers had QR scanners than phones, but so if anybody has their computer out, the address is there at the bottom, but you're welcome to pull it around with the phone too. And if I also, as people are looking at it, they have questions, comments, concerns. I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Maybe take 5 minutes and just take a look at the app.
Yeah.
Let Fitz recover his throat a little bit. Maybe some money or something like that, whatever you need.
Yeah. No.
Taking
Good.
Right, yeah.
Rachel, she's like, so how should I approach coding the tool?
Hail?
So that it could be easily into.
Yeah.
And it's just like, when I said things like, well, yeah, follow our code. Like, functional way. think about it, which is like if you're gonna build a UI, make it simple.
Yep.
I'm still wondering about the
People with it.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I mean, streamlit that app now, which is kind of like it's sitting on the corner. So,
Did you work with Chris?
He showed me this video.
I mean, I'm trying to click on this stuff.
what's happening over there?
Nothing open.
That's the loading icon.
What is it?
Yeah.
But no,
Did you say why you wanted to transition into a
can you click?
I think that was like
I wonder what it was doing.
plan because I mean, you know, once you start doing that, you can kind of see the limitations.
I mean, I think that's all my experience with any JavaScript. It's like, at the end of the day, you're a layer that is unnecessary and make decisions for you that comes back to haunt you. But then again, it's like, because it's Python, right, it feels itself.
Maybe another minute and then
I was just trying
Oh. Oh, yeah. Water controller.
perfect demo failure.
Yeah, but I think it's also the GOG size of edge. Yeah, there's just too many details of the level.
this is zoning, which I know is what the data set is.
Is it Conti or Conti?
No, it's
Well,
super
you know, that's
almost parcel level. So it's
Josh is just Josh. He's less interested in like
Because I have the same exact problem when you use like observable.
Rachel.
I don't know if it's like control over
My hope was to
so
get
this one I made from Vermont takes you
basically building modules around as like doing all the analysis.
Now it's trying to all the excited.
there must be like everybody is saying the same problem.
But because I wasn't reloading,
But it's
basically I'm waiting for Dudley to get there so that she can look into that, have access to all the data, all the
okay.
I like it.
I was just curious, did anyone just have it not work at all? That's always a good feedback. Failure,
Yeah.
failure, failure, failure. Okay, great. Live testing's great. This is the point of it. And we're putting a lot of data through that so it can break pretty easily. So useful feedback. Were there, for those that were able to access it, were there specific things that maybe raised questions or things that stuck out to you? Or
we were talking just about it now. On Streamlit, is it possible to kind of control the level of granularity once you come in onto the page so that you don't render everything if you don't need to?
granularity is like, this is how far you zoomed into things, or what do you mean by granularity?
Yeah, like how much you see the details of the map, for example. So you don't need to go to show all the details of the map, right?
Yeah, I'm not certain of the answer to that. That's definitely a thing that is like already implemented in the later version. Like it's pretty easy to do that in React. I'd have to look more into that for sure.
One thing that I noticed, which is more of like built into the Streamlit kind of multi-select boxes. I'm not sure if there's a way around this, but I think for users, just like a UX pattern, like it's hard to know when you successfully made an update, right? Because like there is a lag between when you select and when the map propagates, which the new version maybe you've like thought of a way around that, but sometimes I find it's even better to just have an extra button or something that just says like update map, because like then it takes away the confusion. It's like I made a change and I clicked update, therefore my change propagated. Sometimes with prototypes it's better to be super explicit rather than, but assume.
Yeah, quick question, I guess. Why I guess, try to do the front end to, I know I would get like super overwhelmed with like having to build a whole front end and a back end, mostly because I don't like front end.
Sure.
For example, like maybe you could like, to be even faster, use something like Superset that just like is a data viz platform that sits on top of a back end, and like users can just like make whatever they want.
Yeah, I think that
Just being patient.
that the feedback from that wouldn't be from the people who are interested in using it. It wouldn't be kind of concrete and specific enough. Like I think that a lot of the users we're most interested in are people working in local government or people working at developers, and I think that having something that's there that you can give feedback on rather than having a sort of open box that you can generate ideas from will make the feedback more actionable in the future. I do think that, yeah, building the front end and the back end, one, Streamlit is like extremely easy. Like it does not feel like you're doing both front end and back end. It feels like you're doing back end and then saying like Streamlit go effectively. Like it is quite simple. So that didn't end up feeling like a huge concern, I wouldn't say, but I think that there is value in the open-endedness as well that maybe would be worthwhile to have as a sort of secondary place for generating ideas about, okay, you couldn't find what you wanted here, maybe you look at this thing. I guess the only concern that would be sort of, as Jonathan was saying earlier, that the time commitment, right, from someone who's interested in doing that. Like, getting someone to get feedback and look at something you've made is one thing. Just sort of handing someone a website and saying, like, play around, I think a lot of people will be like, I don't have the time to play around.
Yeah, super fair.
Yeah, a lot of the users we're talking about have really limited time. They're volunteers. They're like, it's one of those things that sometimes there's this piece where you have to create the thing for them to look at it and be like, well, this is what I actually need. But then be like, oh, here's the thing you actually need. You just go there and find it. There are a handful of people in the places of our state of Vermont that like have the technical know-how, the knowledge of the data, and like the capabilities to do something really interesting. And those become our super users at some point. But getting it out so that people that make choices see it first is really helpful for an initiative. But I think this could be really interesting if you start getting it. Because I think understanding their questions, what they're actually trying to answer, and what data goes into that is really relevant.
Yeah.
Could you give an example use case of what a city planner might do with this dashboard? What information might they look at?
Yeah, so looking at some cross-combination of zoning and demographics too. Well, I think city planner is maybe like a slightly higher up the chain than I think would be spending a lot of time on the dashboard, but maybe someone who's sort of working in the city planning office and is kind of trying to generate ideas before getting into the nitty-gritty might want to look at sort of demographic areas within the county and compare them to zoning areas and see if they could identify a good target for a potential development site or something like that. They're talking with a developer has some kind of idea about something they want to do, and they could sort of point them towards this as a first processing. Yeah, sorry.
I just want to add to that, which is that a common phenomenon in Vermont is the lack of data-driven evidence to support planning and decision-making in the state. And so what this offers, maybe not a Burlington City Planner, but definitely a select board or a planning commission, is the quantitative evidence base to justify their decision-making in policy proposals, in grant applications. It allows for them to leverage data to make decisions rather than a more typical Vermont-based approach, which is strong anecdotes make strong cases in political arenas typically. So this allows for almost a cultural shift towards using data rather than the dude with the loudest voice and the most compelling political strategy to pursue planning and development.
Any other questions or anything? Okay, cool. Well, if you would like to, and maybe even if you wouldn't, on the prototype on the homepage, there's a link to a survey that you can fill out. It'd be great if you take the 2 minutes or whatever. And we'll give you an extra 2 minutes to enjoy lunch. Or wait, the next
Next one.
Yeah. But thank you guys.